Welcome to RSE for Grown-Ups. Come along with us as we walk you through the Relationships and Sex Education curriculum, otherwise known as RSE. We will be breaking the current curriculum down into manageable key stage chunks and topics.
This podcast is for parents, caregivers, or anyone in a supportive role with a young person. We will help you feel equipped for the highs and lows of growing up. If you're already listening, then it shows you are committed to supporting the important young people in your life. I'm Kelsie.
And I'm Sophie, and we are outreach workers at Luton Sexual Health. This podcast was funded by Public Health in Luton. Welcome back to RSE for Grown-Ups. This is our part 2 of Key Stage 4. So we are talking more about sexual health related topics, i.e. contraception, sexually transmitted infections. And that is a humongous part of the curriculum and something really important for young people to learn about. And also mine and Kelsey's sort of bread and butter working in a sexual health clinic. So just as a little warning for today, we are going to be doing a condom demonstration. We are going to be showing you an STI test kit and also some different contraceptive methods. So for our audio listeners, if you want to see what we're up to, you can head over to our YouTube, but we will try and describe it as best we can so that if you are listening, that you still know what we're on about and what we're doing. So today, let's start off with just talking about our experience of contraception, getting again into the mindset of a 15, 16-year-old who may be looking at exploring their contraceptive options, even if they're not sexually active. Can you remember your first experience of what contraception was, Kelsie? How you went about accessing it? Who knew? All those sorts of things.
I think, actually, if I'm going to go right back to the beginning, I actually think that my first experience of any type of contraception was using emergency contraception.
Mm-hmm.
So I was probably about 16, left school, having sex with a partner that I had at the time and used a condom. And we thought that there might have been like an issue with the condom or it'd split or it didn't look right or something like that. So next morning went and got emergency contraception.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it was, I went to Brook because there used to be a Brook in Luton. Obviously now Luton Sexual Health is an integrated service and we see young people of all different age groups and have lots of different services. But I think I went the next morning to Brook in Luton and then there I was recommended to go on the pill, but I didn't go get it from them. I then went home and then I think I had a conversation with my mum about it and I got the pill from my GP. But I don't think I told my mum about the emergency contraception situation. I just think I went home and was like, oh, I think I need to like go on the pill. And she was like, yeah, you just have to book an appointment and go to the doctors. I don't remember it being, it was like a normal part of like what people did. And I think a lot of my friends were on the pill. So obviously that was my first incidence of taking contraception. And I continued to take the pill until I was 20 and I got pregnant while I was on the pill, but we'll come back to that, I'm sure, when we talk about more about contraception. So what was your first experience of taking contraception?
I think mine was literally exactly the same. I think my boyfriend and I at the time, this was the first time that I'd had any type of sex and we were using condoms and I think we were worried that the condom had split. And I think I was 15, just turning 16. And so I went to the pharmacy, got myself emergency contraception, paid for it.
Yep.
25 quid. And now it's probably even more than that. And then I had the same thing, was talked to my mum and said, I think I need to go on the pill, because also you say the pill because I wasn't really aware of any other type of contraception. And I don't really think at that time there was like a different, there wasn't an alternative for us.
I don't think so. I think now a lot of the young people we see, will be looking at their contraception options before they've had sex for the first time.
Yeah.
That wasn't really something I'd considered. It was use a condom was our contraception option for first sex. And like we did.
Yeah.
We talked about this before, like our age group were quite like, that was the part that had been drilled in, like you must use a condom. So we were doing that. We just kind of didn't know about any of the other options. And we talk a lot to young people about LARC, which is long-acting reversible contraception. And I would say that the majority of young people that come into our under 18s clinics and that we have a conversation with will opt for something more like an implant or the depot injection or something that is a little bit more reliable and long lasting.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes it is the case if you sort of go with what your peers are going for. Yeah. So like you said, all of my friends were like, oh, I'm on the pill, I'm going on the pill. So you're like, well, I'm going to go on the pill then, because that makes the most sense. Yeah. And I was on the pill for 11 years. So I was on it for a really long time. I did take it religiously, so I didn't get pregnant.
That's the difference between Sophie and I. Yeah, no. It's absolutely fine.
It's not digging you, but just like, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that is the conversation we have with young people. Like, different contraceptions would suit different people, and we don't just mean people's bodies. We also mean like if you're somebody, exactly, if you've got a busy lifestyle, or you're a little bit forgetful, or you know, things like that, or you're not someone who I would set an alarm on my phone, and that's how I remembered to take the pill. And people used to joke like, oh, that's Sophie's pill alarm going off at 7 p.m.
Yeah, but if you're so Sophie and I are quite different in our approach to things, and I have more of an ADHD personality, and I did not remember to take my pill, nor did I really understand the importance of why I needed to take it every day at the same time, and how that was so important. And actually, I think the lesson that we do give to young people a lot is that, and that they maybe don't know, is that in real terms, with the inclusion of human error, the pill is around 84% effective. So that means that of every 100 people taking the pill, 16 of those people are getting pregnant. And for me personally, so I can't really remember either missing my pill, or I don't know, going out, partying, maybe I was sick, who knows. But I missed my pill, but I didn't think anything of it. And I carried on taking it, obviously still trying to prevent pregnancy. And I wasn't having periods because of the pill that I was taking. And I'm a big fan of anything that would stop my period. So right now I use a coil. I don't even need it for contraceptive reasons, but it's the best thing ever for me to stop my period. So I didn't know I was pregnant till I was like, probably did a test when I was about 4 months. And I remember then I went for a scan, and people are like, did you not realize you miss your periods, all this stuff? Like, no, I didn't, because I was still taking my pill. So I just thought it was normal. And when I went for a scan, they were like, you're 16 weeks and 5 days pregnant. And I was like, wow, okay. But actually, like, you explain and you talk a lot to young people about how our cycle works and how bodies work. And that's something that I didn't really understand when I was younger. Yeah.
And I was just thinking when you were talking about your first initial experience of being like, well, it was just like, we were just told it's condoms or nothing. It's condoms or no sex. And I think the really important thing that I think we both stress now when we talk to young people is the importance of knowing like your cycle, when you could get pregnant, and how the contraceptive, how different types of contraception affect your cycle. So we get lots of young people who come to the clinic who have heard, like, I think we've mentioned this, heard horror stories about what hormonal contraception is going to do to the body. It's going to add more hormones. It's going to
put I don't want to put weird hormones in my body. And it's like, we're trying to explain to people, we're not actually putting anything different in your body than what it already makes. It's just altering the levels, like microscopic amounts.
It's just altering the levels so that you don't get pregnant. So when we explain the cycle, and I've done this with, you know, young people who are in year 11, and I'm like, oh, I really wish schools would focus on, and we've spoken about this in, I think, Key Stage 2, how important it is for young people to know about the cycle and the menstrual cycle, because a lot of young people don't even know that word, menstrual cycle. They're like, I know I have a period, but I don't really understand why. So we always explain to young people that a menstrual cycle is continuous, and it could last for between, I don't know, it could be 28 days, it could be 35 days. So you could have a shorter cycle or a longer cycle. The beginning of your cycle is your period. So the first day of your bleed. Again, people bleed for different amounts of time. And then you go into, once your period is finished, you go into your ovulation phase. So when an egg is released from an ovary and it's just floating around looking for that sperm. That's why it's released. It's there to look for sperm. And then, you know, if it doesn't meet with a sperm.
The thing is as well, there is kind of something that I didn't understand till I was definitely much older and into my adult life, and I definitely didn't understand when I was younger, is like the horniness that comes with ovulation. There's no better way of
because that egg wants to meet that sperm, and that sperm wants to meet that egg.
And when we talk about like a biological urge, that feeling that you get, and And actually to explain sometimes to young women and to girls that you think you really want that guy, but actually you're just ovulating.
It's just those hormones that you're so, you're quite, you're worried about, because they hear so much. There's negative press around contraception. And don't get me wrong, people have had some awful experiences. Yeah. But this is why it's so important that they find the right information, accurate information, speak to a healthcare professional and try out all the different methods.
Yeah. I think that's really important, like that young people know what options are available to them, but also that they feel liberated to go into the clinic and say, I'd like to try this.
Yeah.
And in our clinic, if you want to try a method of contraception, you'll be asked to try it for a minimum of 3 months, because during that period, you might experience some side effects, but it's by the end of that 3-month period that it will really settle in. So someone might get like, I don't know, like bloating or breakthrough bleeding or spotting, or they might have irregular periods. But you generally find after that initial 3-month period that those symptoms settle. Of course, if the symptoms are like unbearable for someone, or they're causing them pain or distress or something like that, go back and speak to a healthcare provider, tell them. Yeah. Because, for example, the implant is, I'm going to hold this up to the camera, but it is very tiny, the implant. It's in here and it's about the size of a hair clip, so a little hairpin. The implant sits underneath the skin, just at the top of the arm, in front of the muscle. And when I used to HCA and chaperone the under 18s clinics, we've got some fabulous consultants, but Dr. Turner used to say to the young person, can you time? I think this is going to take me less than a minute to fit this implant in you. And they would look up at the clock, hold their arm out, and I'd sit there with them and we'd be chatting and we'd look at the clock, and she had it nailed down to about 45 seconds.
Nice.
For an implant fitting.
So quick.
So it is so quick, and it's numbed while it's inserted, all of those kind of things. But actually, someone who just started taking the implant might experience some heavy bleeding in that first 3-month period. But actually, if you come back to the clinic, they might not say, okay, cool, we'll take the implant straight out. They might offer you an alternative medication just to take in the meantime to help settle things out.
Sometimes you can go on the pill and the implant, can't you, to save, temporarily, like not save, to eliminate that sort of distress of bleeding, because we know that people, it could just be really frustrating and annoying to keep bleeding, absolutely, but also like sensory sensitivities and all of the prep that comes with that, and the surprise of having, oh no, there's blood in my pants again, or it's a lot.
Or like, I want to go on holiday, or I'm going on a night out. Especially when you're a young person, unpredictable bleeding can be something that's like really quite triggering and stressful for people. After I got pregnant on the pill, when I was 20 and my 16 weeks and 5 days pregnant, after that I was offered a depot injection when I was in hospital after my son was born. And I'm going to hold up, I've got my little picture of my depot injection here. So this is a method of contraception that I used probably for around 3 years between having my son and having my daughter. And from what I know now, it probably isn't a method I would have chosen again to use that long term. But I was accessing this through my GP. I'd never really had a conversation with a professional. But a depot is a good option for a lot of young people who are looking for something that no one can see realistically. There are young people who come to us who say, I can't take a pill pack at home because if I get caught with it, I might get in trouble. And we're not trying to encourage young people to access contraception behind their parents' backs, but it's evident that they're already having sex behind their parents' back. So we do need to try and help them make that situation safe.
And we also get adult women who also need something. They don't want to get pregnant, and they need something discreet that someone can't see. And like, the implant, you can't necessarily see it, but you can definitely feel it, can't you? If someone was to touch your arm, you could feel it under the skin.
It's not just so much like they have to keep the bandage on for the first 48 hours. So it'll have like a Steriplaster around it. And then it does have a compression bandage that's kept round and you can't get it wet, things like that for the first couple of days. So, I mean, some people are just like, yeah, that's fine. I can hide that and that's no problem. Some people don't need to hide it and they're just like, hey, I got an implant fitted. And other people might say, that's too much for me. It's too much of a risk for someone to be like, why have I got that? So that's no problem. There are different options for everyone. For me personally, I found that the injection affected my sex drive. Potentially having a newborn also affected my sex drive. But after a while, I was like, oh, okay, no, this is got something to do with this method of contraception. And it doesn't necessarily work for me. So one of the myths / horror stories, things that people say about the injection is about the time that it takes people to get pregnant after taking it. And we hear a lot of people saying, oh, if I take the injection, then when I stop, it might make me infertile. I don't know whether I'm just a ridiculously fertile person or I was at the time or not, but I decided, my partner and I decided we wanted to have another baby. I was due to have an injection in the January, and I didn't have that injection in the January because I wanted to think about conceiving. And the doctor at the time told me it could take a really long time from when you have this to get pregnant. And I'd been on it for 3 years. So I was quite anxious about that. And then I was pregnant by the middle of March. So who knows? Different bodies.
Different bodies. And that's it. Like, we do get lots of, and we've mentioned this, young people, whoever actually, adults as well, who are accessing contraception, are really worried about the side effects, what could happen to their body, and also not being able to get pregnant. Like, I think that is probably the top one that young people say, will I be able to get pregnant? Will it make me infertile? And I normally say, no, but chlamydia will.
Yes.
You know?
No, chlamydia will definitely.
Chlamydia can definitely make you infertile. And I also just say there's not actual founded research. And if you came to our clinic and spoke to like our lead consultant, she would say the same thing. It's not just me and Kelsie trying to advertise contraception. It's like there's not enough research around that. And we give contraception out all the time. And to people who are going to start a family at some point, but just not yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that realistically, the national curriculum and the work that people do in school is great at listing every single different type of contraception option that is available. So young people will learn about LARC, the long-acting reversible contraception. They will cover coils. Got my little. This is a copper coil, and then there's on the table there's the hormonal coil. So it will cover things like coils, your implants, your patch, your injection, and then they'll go through things like caps and diaphragms and like stuff that young people are just not going to use. Like realistically, know what our numbers of anyone coming into the clinic to access that kind of contraception is incredibly low. We
always start, don't we? Our sessions, I go, right, as a warm-up activity to contraception, there are 15 types of contraception. Can you name them all? And they're like, what, 15?
Yeah.
And a lot of young people now haven't even heard of like the vaginal ring, caps, diaphragms. No. A lot of them don't really know about like the injection, for example. So we focus on, I would say, implant, injection, coils, and the pill and the patch maybe is like those. They're not LARC, but they are, I guess they are a bit of a, I was going to say a fan favourite with young people.
Kind of like the socially acceptable form of contraception, aren't they?
Yeah,
like, it's like, I don't know, a rite of passage. They put you on a pedestal, I put you on the pill.
Yeah, put you on the pill first and then you can graduate to the implant sort of thing. Once you feel comfortable, because, for some people, myself included, taking medication or taking something that, if it's different, it can be really daunting, especially if you are worried about the effect it's going to have on you. If you already struggle with things like your mental health, there are definitely things that can.
A really big one for young people and something that they struggle with is the idea of weight gain associated with contraception.
Yeah.
And I think that the most questions I have had is it going to make me fat? And there is no scientific evidence to suggest that any individual contraception can make people gain weight. Like, different bodies react differently to different hormones. And actually what the contraception can do is increase your appetite.
Yeah.
So it's a hard one because contraception doesn't make people gain weight. Contraception can make people have an increased appetite. Like those munchies you get like before your period when you're like craving like, I don't know, like the stereotypical like ice cream in bed or something. Well, some kinds of contraception can give you that feeling. And I think that's the thing for young people to understand, that it's not that it inherently makes you put on weight. It can make you crave like junk food or sweet food, things like that. But actually gaining weight comes down to how you look after your body, how much you move your body, the food that you eat. There's so much more to it than just what contraception you use. And there is no across the board pattern, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's a big topic.
It's a big topic. And I think one last thing on contraception is young people need to, I think this is really important that schools can try and cover this, and if not, that parents at home can explain. And I always get out my diagrams because it's just easier, but like how contraception works.
Yeah.
Like if you're putting something into your body and you're worried about what's going on, you need to understand what it's actually doing. So like we said, it's not giving you more hormones. They're hormones that a person already has in their body. And it's changing the levels of those. So it's doing things like thickening the mucus around the cervix so that little pesky sperm can't get in as easily. It's changing the lining of your womb so that an egg is finding it more difficult to implant itself into the womb. If an egg did meet with a sperm, it can't implant into the womb lining. And also potentially, depending on what contraception you're on, it's releasing less eggs from your ovaries as well. So those are the three main things that are happening in order that, you know, pregnancy doesn't happen and occur. It's not, and it's just in a localized area. It's not sort of like free flowing and, you know, but of course we understand that it does affect people. And that's why it's just super important to, if it is, and you've given it some time and you're still not happy, we do encourage people to come back and talk to us at the clinic. Absolutely.
I think contraception is something that women discuss amongst themselves as well.
Yeah.
So we are often fighting against my mum's auntie's friend's sister said, or my big sister used this, or well, my mum used this, or well, my mum says I should get this type of contraception. And while it is really good that this is a topic that people discuss amongst themselves, you've got to remember that it is different for each person, and that a health professional will give the best advice tailored to that person.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about some of the hormonal methods of contraception that prevent pregnancy. Shall we move on to barrier methods and condoms?
Yes, barrier methods and predominantly condoms.
Yes.
You know how what I'm going to say right now. So what is the picture for young people and condoms currently? Do you think that people are aware of what it's like with young people?
I don't know. We've had a lot of discussions about this because when we were younger, when we were 15, 16, this age group we were talking about, I certainly didn't want to get pregnant. I didn't want to have that conversation with my parents. I didn't want to have that conversation with my boyfriend's parents. That was it was a no-go.
Yeah.
So we used condoms, and that was something that was just really normal. It was part of the routine. We discussed it before we had sex. He brought condoms over. He put them in the drawer for when we were going to have sex, like so that we were prepared, so that we had them. And that was just like pretty normal. I mean, I also remember boys and young men carrying condoms with them, like in their wallets. And
fact, I remember when I first started working with young people, and people would come and before I worked in sex education myself, when I was working as a youth worker, and people would come into our sessions, and one of the things they would say is that if you're carrying condoms in your wallet, just make sure like you check the date on them, that they haven't gone out of date, or that they haven't got damaged or crushed from being sitting in your back pocket. And like, now young people don't carry condoms.
No, and they're not using condoms either. In fact, it's a bit of a World Health Organization crisis.
So I think that there was a study, I'm going to say don't quote me on facts. I might have to link the actual study just in case I get the facts wrong. But it was something along the lines of only 46% of young people used a condom in their last sexual experience when surveyed.
Yeah, and I think we'll definitely link it, but there's lots of studies about them using it on their first sexual experience as well. And we're just seeing, the numbers are just showing a really steady decline, which is really interesting to me because RSHE became mandatory in schools in 2020. We should be seeing the opposite.
Yeah.
We should be seeing more people being aware of like where they can get condoms for free, because young people here in the UK can get condoms for free.
Under 25.
Under 25. In Luton, you can get them for free over 25 as well.
We'll link that as well.
We're going to have to do a lot of linking. Yeah. And we speak to young people all the time, mainly when we're in schools, but also when they come into the clinic, because like you said, and like I said, our first experience was emergency contraception, but we were using condoms, whereas we meet young people who their first time sex, they've then come in straight the day after and need emergency contraception. They haven't used condoms at all. And we hear a lot of condom excuses.
We hear a lot of pull out game strong.
The pull out method. The pull out method is not a form of contraception.
I think that if there's one thing that I hope that anybody listening to this could teach their boys, their boys and young men, any in their life, is that your pull-out game is not strong. It does not work. We go into schools and we teach people about pre-cum. We teach them about how it only takes like one sperm to get pregnant. We teach them about...
And the first time you have sex.
Yes.
Just because it's like your first time doesn't mean you are immune to pregnancy or STIs.
No, absolutely not. And I do get a sense that young people at the moment do feel that they're a little bit invincible when it comes to like STI testing. Like, great, they have a much better national curriculum and they are learning about healthy relationships and consent. But maybe without a little bit of that fear-based, you are going to, I don't know, get really sick, or you could get an STI that could kill you because we don't have that anymore. We're going to talk about STIs more shortly. But I just don't know. I just think it is really important to have these conversations about condom use, and it needs to go back to basics. And whether it comes from mums or dads or other family members, it's really important. Yeah,
it just needs to be normalised, doesn't it? It needs to be normalised again. Like, we do sessions with groups of young boys who are 16, 17, who are sexually active, who will put a condom demonstrator on the table in front of them in a condom packet and ask them to show us how they can use a condom. And either, unfortunately, they don't have a clue, they do it wrong. And if they were to do that in real life, there is a high chance of STIs and pregnancy, or they don't want to touch the condoms. They're worried about the texture, the feel of them. And also, like, of course, doing it in front of a group of other young boys who also don't want to touch them. It just creates this like, oh no, I don't need them, or I don't want them, or I'm not going to need them. But we just need to make it part of like
normal conversation. And I think it's really important to consider sexuality when we're thinking about contraception as well at this point, because someone might have a child who is 15 or 16, say, who's gay, who is like out and gay, and the parents might think, yay, no teenage pregnancy. So maybe they're not having the same amount of conversations. Maybe they don't know about the risks involved. Maybe they don't feel comfortable talking to their child about having gay sex if that's not something that they know anything about. But actually, like, in that situation, condom use is really important. And we'll talk, when we get onto STIs, we will talk more about HIV and PEP and PrEP. But like, PrEP should be as accessible to people as the pill. Yeah. And young people who are like men that are having sex with men, or that identify as gay or bisexual, lots of trans women, all sorts of different groups of people are the target audience to be on PrEP. So if you are an adult of an LGBT plus child, you need to be aware of what the sexual health risks are, so you can educate them appropriately on those as well.
Great. So on that note, will you do a condom demo for us, Kelsie?
Of course, it's my speciality.
Your speciality, because this is a huge thing that we see, is just people not knowing how to use one correctly. They're sort of using too many hands. They're thinking about, it's like, we're just going to give you a step-by-step breakdown.
So let's get my demonstrator out.
For those listening,
we've got a bright blue,
it's lovely and blue,
penis looking demonstrator that we use in schools and as an education tool, and that young people absolutely despise. But we don't go into schools and put condoms on cucumbers or bananas or anything like that. We do use penis-shaped demonstrators. So that can sit there. First thing we talk about with condoms, and first thing that young people should be aware of, is make sure that your condom is in date. So if you look on the back of a packet, it will have a date along the side. This one is in date until 2028. So we're good to go. And then on the front, they'll have a size. So this one's regular. Just going to use a regular one for this demonstration. But if you can see on the table next to me, we've got large, trim, flavored, extra safe, all sorts of different condoms. On the back of a condom wrapper, there's also a kite mark. This is really important because this shows that it's like a licensed product and that's been quality tested. And actually, there have been issues where people have made like promotional condoms at nightclubs and at events and all sorts of things, and been giving them out, and they're not kite marked and they weren't actually up to standard. So we're looking for a kite mark and a date. Okay. When you open a condom wrapper, you're just going to push it to the side in the packet, push the condom to the side and rip from the top down to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Condom out. And when we're getting the condom out of the wrapper, we are looking for it. This is maybe not going to show up on camera, or focus exactly. But if it does, you'll be able to see. It looks like the top of a baby's bottle is the best way to describe it. I'm going to flick it the wrong way round just so that if you can see it. If it looks like a little hat, if it's all the rings on the inside, it's the wrong way round. So if you put a condom on top of a penis the wrong way round, you need to throw it away and get another one, because if there is any pre-cum on the top and you've touched it that way, then flicked it over, you've just put it in the vagina. Yeah. Okay. So we've got a condom the right way round, and then all we need to do is pinch the top of the condom, place it over the top of the penis, and roll it all the way down.
Nice.
Okay. And that is it. It is that simple to put a condom on. I think one of the things that people often forget is pinching the top.
Yeah.
So it leaves a little gap, leaves a little gap up here, and basically so that there's somewhere for the cum to go. It's got to be somewhere. Yeah. And then we'll take it off, take it all the way down.
Roll it off.
I flicked it over because you wouldn't do that if there was stuff in it. It's because it's empty. You wouldn't necessarily turn it inside out. But then you tie it in a knot and dispose of it. Now, for the benefit of parents, we are often telling young people not to put condoms down the toilet.
Of course, all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to have that conversation with your own young person, it might also be worth mentioning that wrap them in a tissue, put them in the bin, dispose of them discreetly, especially if you've got younger children in the house, like siblings, whatever. Make sure you're polite and responsible about that.
Yeah.
And don't put condoms down the toilet, because even if you think you flushed it,
it's going to come back up.
And then you're going to have that conversation with your parents.
Yeah.
So,
and young people can access these from Luton Sexual Health and pharmacies around the town.
We have schools that are condom card providers, colleges that are condom card providers.
The uni.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
libraries. Yeah. Free condoms are really readily available.
Yeah. And all of that information will be in the description link, all about our C card, because it has changed slightly. So please make sure you're looking at the most up-to-date information about it. And we'll put it on our Instagram and all that sort of stuff as well. But young people can ask for any different size. They can ask for a mixture so that they can try them on, see which ones they like, see which one works for them. And they'll also have this magical stuff in the condom as well, in the condom packet. I'm just holding it up to the camera. It's just a little sachet of lube and lubricant. And something I wish I'd learned about in school, or someone had spoken to me about, was how important lube can be, particularly if you are a vagina owner.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have a vagina, lube's your best friend.
Absolutely. And I think that is really important to kind of...
and for anal sex and...
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Actually all sex, but just...
hand jobs, vaginal sex, anal sex, get that lube
any
involved.
Type of sex.
Yeah, get lube involved. It's liberating.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing.
It's really good. And actually, I think that it's really important that you have a conversation with your children and young people about condom use and about the kind of responsibility that is involved in that. And also about how they protect themselves, because one of the things that really stresses me out personally, and this is my personal opinion, is when girls come in and say, I don't know, like they're in a situation where they're at risk of pregnancy. They might have contracted chlamydia, gonorrhea, something like that. And they say, well, my partner says the condoms don't feel as good. It's like, girl, you are having sex with a guy that doesn't even make you orgasm, and he is giving you chlamydia, and he's saying that he doesn't want to use a condom for his pleasure. Like, we need to feel empowered to say, actually, that's okay, that it might be slightly not different. As good for you, or slightly different, or we can work around that, or we can do other things.
We talk about lots of different ways that you can make each other feel good that aren't just penetration.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And like, it is important that sex is about pleasure. It isn't about submission.
And that's why, and this is the hard thing, I think, for me and Kelsie, is that pleasure isn't on the national curriculum.
No.
So it is the responsibility of other safe adults in young people's lives to be having those conversations. And we do talk to young people a lot about that. And you can sort of see their faces like, oh, you're talking to me about how sex should feel good. You're not just telling me like, don't have sex. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, of course, because we've already discussed this. Like people have sex because it feels nice and makes them feel good. And it's a part of consent. Telling someone what you like and what you dislike, where you like being touched, to keep going, that feels really nice.
Or like if they're hurting you, to communicate that, like stop, slow
that
down,
hurts.
move, change position.
Yeah.
And that's really hard for girls.
It
and
is.
like we've talked about this, like it's something that everyone struggles with growing up, being able to communicate your needs essentially, and how you do that, and like settling for rubbish sex when you're younger because you don't know how to communicate that. But actually that is one thing that I'm glad that we have the opportunity to work with girls to talk about, and to make them feel kind of empowered to be like, oh yeah, this is for my pleasure too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So that was a lot. This is like the bit where normally we're like, right, we're just going to take a break. Okay. So we've talked about LARC. We've talked about the pill, the patch, and we've talked about we've talked about condoms. There are other barrier methods of contraception. I've got an internal condom here. It's not really something that young people use.
Not really. No.
Sometimes people will talk about things like dental dams for oral sex. If you want to use a dental dam and you can't access one, get a condom and cut it in half.
Yeah.
There you go. You've got a dental dam.
And there are lots of videos online about how you do that, and maybe we can also film one just so you know how to make one.
And for anyone that doesn't know, a dental dam is like basically a latex sheet that you might lay over a vulva or over an anus if you were given oral sex, essentially.
Yeah. Because all these barrier methods protect against STIs as well as pregnancy, whereas all of our contraception that's hormonal or like the copper coil is just protecting against pregnancy. It doesn't protect against those infections.
Okay, so infections. What are the main STIs that we teach about in school?
Chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, HIV, and we talk quite a lot about herpes.
And then we get a lot of questions about parasitic infections.
Yeah.
Pubic lice, scabies, those kind of things. They're not the most prevalent.
The one that I can never pronounce, but we call just
TV.
Trichomoniasis?
I don't know. It's okay, we're not medical professionals.
TV.
So TV is another parasitic STI.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, what's the biggest issue, the most high risk STI for young people?
Chlamydia.
So chlamydia rates are really high from 16 to 24-year-olds.
Yeah.
And we have across the country, but in Luton as well, we have the National Chlamydia Screening Programme.
Yeah.
So it's called NCSP. So the National Chlamydia Screening Programme is a really simple way of free testing for anyone under the age of 25. They would grab a little test kit box. Do you want to...
I've got my test kit box here by my side. So this is a full STI screening kit, I was going to say NSPCC.
NCSP.
NCSP kit would just have the stuff you need if you're taking a chlamydia or gonorrhea test.
And actually, just to point out, it does test for chlamydia and gonorrhea.
Yes, it does. So for people picking up a kit, or even if they come into clinic and have a chlamydia or gonorrhea test, if they have a vagina, I'm just holding it up now, it is a long swab. And often when I show this to young people, bless them, they're like, so like a COVID swab.
Yeah,
like,
it does.
Yeah,
it does look like
but don't worry, it's not going all the way down the back of your throat. It's just a self swab that someone with a vagina would swirl around the inside of the opening of the vagina a couple of times and then just pop it back into the tube, and either you pop it in our little laboratory box in the clinic, or you would put it back in your test kit if you're sending it off. And for people with a penis, it's a urine sample. So peeing in a pot if you come into the clinic. If you're not coming to the clinic and you are ordering a test kit, it's a little bit more of a fiddly one.
I would just say you don't have to use this. You could use anything clean to pee into.
But it does give you, I'm just holding it up, a tiny little silver pouch, which you could pee into and then gently pour into the little pot. But a lot of people look at this and go, how am I meant to aim into this? I'm
You're not.
Any way you can get the pee in, do it.
Yeah.
So that's it. That is how simple and easy it is to test for chlamydia and gonorrhea.
And it's a hard one, isn't it? Because lots of people with a penis will think that someone is going to stick the cotton bud type test down the middle of the penis.
No.
And that is not how we test for chlamydia and gonorrhea. That is done by urine sample. If somebody was incredibly symptomatic, that they maybe had like some nasty discharge coming out the head of the penis, then maybe someone would just gently swab that. But there is no testing that takes place now where anything is getting inserted into the penis. And that is actually something that we still get so many young people say.
A lot.
So that's really important. Chlamydia, what are the risks involved for a young person that might get chlamydia?
Well, I think the thing is with chlamydia and why it spreads so fast and why so many young people have it is because it's commonly known as like the silent infection, because often people don't present with any symptoms at all and for a really long time. So people are having sex without knowing that they have chlamydia and passing it on, and so on and so on, you know, the chain reaction.
And that's when you get the activities in school where people might get test tubes. And then like 3 people have got coloured water in their test tubes and then everyone has to go and keep swapping water until everything in the class has all got the little coloured water in it. And that's a really good visual of how an infection can spread around.
So often we do get young people who come for testing and they will test positive for chlamydia and they will be really shocked, because I think when you think of an infection of any sort, whether that's a chest infection, an ear infection, you have pain and symptoms. And this is something we're really trying to hone in on here in Luton, is like, well, with all young people, to just get your regular screenings, because you really don't know. And I think one of the big risks for young people, young girls with chlamydia, is it can develop into pelvic inflammatory disease, PID. And we've seen young people who maybe have only been sexually active for 2 years, who have had chlamydia in that time, and have already developed PID by the time they're 16 and been in a lot of pain.
It is hard, isn't it? Because PID is a much harder infection to clear
to
as
treat,
well. So it would involve taking much stronger antibiotics for a longer amount of time. Whereas chlamydia treatment is like a week's course of antibiotics. All they need to do is take antibiotics and not have sex for that week, and the partner needs to also take the medication and not have sex so they don't reinfect each other. But when it develops into PID, people can be in really a lot of pain. That means that infection has travelled into the bones and joints of the pelvis, and that's where also it can cause infertility. And so because of the fact that chlamydia doesn't cause those like gonorrhea is famous for
green discharge.
If you got gonorrhea, you kind of get green discharge quite quickly, really. And then obviously people know much more about the risks involved with things like HIV and syphilis. But I think that people just don't think about chlamydia because they don't get the symptoms, or they think it's not that serious. And actually,
it's not that deep.
It's not that deep. That's young people's favourite thing to say to us. Not that deep.
It's not that deep,
Nothing's
miss.
that deep. But it is. It is that deep. And if it gets that deep into your pelvis, then you could be like in quite a lot of pain and quite a lot of distress.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so HIV and syphilis.
Okay.
Young people will learn about HIV and syphilis at school. Syphilis is a huge problem at the moment. Rates of syphilis in the UK are at their highest since 1950. People are having more condomless sex. It's really not cool. It's like syphilis is like would be like my fear.
Your worst fear.
My worst fear. So syphilis can cause huge ulcers, really, in different areas of the body, mainly around the genitals. Sometimes people get them in their mouth. Sometimes people can have them inside their anus.
Rashes on your hands and your feet.
Yes. And then it can develop, syphilis can develop into neurosyphilis, and the infection can go up into the brain. It can cause, knocked my microphone, so who knows what that's going to sound like now. It can go up into the brain and it can turn into neurosyphilis. That can cause blindness, it can cause hair loss, and actually it can really impact someone's mental health.
Yes. Yeah, and I think young people, again, that is not something that is on their radar, quite similarly to HIV actually as well. And often I'm like, when they write down all the infections they know, it is chlamydia, gonorrhea, herpes, and they AIDS instead of HIV. And quite often then they'll speak about, well, is a UTI an STI, or is thrush an STI?
Yeah.
And we sort of have conversations about how they're not sexually transmitted infections, but they can be aggravated by sex. And I'm sort of, I go down the history route of like, well, you remember this man, Henry VIII? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, he supposedly had syphilis. And they're like, what? And that's still a thing? That's still around? I was like, yeah. And I think
Vincent van Gogh.
Yeah. I was
another
like, another famous person with syphilis. Like, don't quote me, but I think we, well, particularly in our town, we're seeing increased rates of syphilis, and it's quite concerning.
Yeah, I think actually, to be honest, we are seeing increased rates of syphilis across the whole of the UK.
Yeah.
And it is something that like BASH, like the British Association for Sexual Health, and people like that are aware of and are talking about.
Yeah.
And actually the only way to prevent syphilis is to use a condom.
Sex. And if you aren't using a condom, you need to get your STI screening.
Yes.
So for syphilis, similar to HIV, it's a blood test.
Yep.
So you would come into clinic and have an intravenous blood test, or amazingly, you can also do an at-home blood test, which some people are like, oh, that sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
But
and actually, we've seen quite a lot about this recently. Actually, by the time this episode comes out, it'll probably be further away. But
oh yeah,
it was very recently National HIV Testing Week. And Keir Starmer become the first UK Prime Minister and also the first G20 leader to publicly take a HIV test.
Yeah.
I bet he's not the first to have ever actually
done one, but on TV.
Yeah.
So if you opt to do it at home, which is completely fair enough, it comes in your little kit, as you can see here on my right, if you're watching us. And you get these little, I don't know how you really explain what they look like. How would you explain what that looks like?
A little, I don't know.
I don't have a clue. It's a tiny little device with a cap on. And what happens is you pull the cap off and there's sort of like a spring mechanism in it. And when you push it down on your finger, a little needle pops out and just pricks the top of your finger. So you would do it. We suggest on this first finger here on your hand after your thumb, press it down, you'll hear a click, and that's when you know that the needle has gone through. You'll also then see a tiny little red mark and it will start bleeding. So you need to have all of your kit set up and ready, actually, is what I probably should have said beforehand. But you get like a little stand, a little cardboard stand to pop your vial in, so that once your finger is pricked, you can have it. I'll pop it on the table here. And you can just start, we call it milking the finger. You can just start milking the finger down into the pot. Again, there's a video actually on our Instagram of how to take an STI test, so you can see it all up close. So do head over there. But it's really important to milk it. Our colleague Drew would also say to get a glass of warm water beforehand, to pop your finger in, just to warm up all the circulation, make it easier to bleed. And it really isn't that much that you need to fill it.
5 ml, isn't it? It's like 3 or 4 drops of blood.
But you need to make sure that you do fill it up on the little lines. Otherwise, they may not be able to test it properly. And that's it. And then whack a plaster on, get on with your day, pop it all in the post, and then get your results. And, if we detect anything, then you'll be invited in for the right course of treatment.
Absolutely. So amazingly, now we know how to test for all of these things.
Yeah.
Let's talk about HIV.
Let's.
So it's really important that we teach young people about HIV in school. And what I have found is that, unfortunately, even sometimes the professionals that are there to teach the information about it don't have the most accurate and up-to-date information on HIV. And they don't have a good understanding of the picture.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to explain that there are 3 main elements of HIV testing, treatment, and prevention and care at the moment. The first one is testing. Yeah. First thing is testing. People who are having unprotected sex need to be testing.
Whatever type of sex you're having.
Whatever type of sex you're having. Yeah. If you are having unprotected sex, whether you are, whatever your target, whoever you're having sex with, it doesn't matter. Your
target is.
I was going to say whatever target demographic. I
know what you mean.
Like, it doesn't matter whether you are heterosexual, whether you're straight, whether you're cis, whether you're trans.
Yeah.
STI testing is self-care. It is part of a routine of looking after yourself, the same as going to the dentist.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are testing regularly for HIV. That is really important. At the moment now in Luton, we have opt-out testing offered in A&E.
Yeah.
So everyone that goes to Luton A&E will be offered it. Well, they won't be offered. They will be tested for HIV unless they specifically ask not to be.
Yeah.
And everybody that goes for a pre-operation assessment, so a pre-op assessment, will also be tested for HIV. Now, the reason why this is really important is because of the fact that stigma existed around HIV. Medical professionals, generally outside of sexual health, have had a tendency to only test target demographics. So men that have sex with men, gay and bisexual men, and people that come from certain parts of Africa, Black African community living in the UK, those kind of things. Doctors might go, HIV test. But actually what we know is obviously HIV can be transmitted through sex. So anybody can contract it.
Yeah.
It doesn't, unfortunately or fortunately, stick to any kind of target group. So people testing more often. And then we've got PrEP and PrEP. So PrEP and PrEP are magical. They are as revolutionary to sexual health as the invention of the pill.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what PrEP and PrEP are?
Yeah.
Or I just keep talking. It's a little bit of my
your special interest. Yeah. So PrEP, let's talk about PrEP first. So PrEP stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis. And it is a magical pill that can prevent HIV transmission. So as Kelsie said earlier, there are lots of different people that may be eligible for PrEP. Yeah. And it is free and it is part of our sexual health service. So you can have a PrEP consultation. You can speak to our lead HIV and sexual health consultants who will then monitor you whilst you are taking PrEP. There are numerous different ways that somebody can take it. You could take it every day. You could take it event-based. So if you think you're going to go and have a really good weekend,
you might take it just
before. And you can also do it on the T's and S's. So Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think unless you're a Sophie person, like an alarm on your phone type, I'm not going to forget to take my medication. Yeah. T's and S's probably like, T's and S's wouldn't work for you.
Yeah. So it's pretty amazing. And we definitely love to push PrEP because it's not something that a lot of people know about, particularly people who maybe lived through the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and who grew up watching their friends die of HIV-related illnesses or AIDS, who maybe were like working in hospitals when people were being treated.
Adverts dropping down on the TV.
And so a lot of the time as well, I feel like there's a bit of like mistrust, like what you're saying that a pill can now prevent that from happening. Yeah. I don't believe you.
I do actually find that working within the LGBT plus community as well, because we do like screening in like saunas that are accessed by gay men, things like that. And especially with the older generation, men that are maybe 50 or 60 years of age, when we say, you know, you can take this pill every day and then there's no chance you can get HIV. They're like,
I don't know. Yeah.
But actually, it is incredibly successful in preventing HIV transmission. Yeah. When taken properly, it is like what did our clinician said, it's as effective as they're allowed to say it is. Yeah. Like 99.9%.
And post-exposure prophylaxis, so PEP, is something that can be given to someone a bit like the emergency contraceptive pill. Like if you feel like you've been exposed to HIV, if the condom split or broke, or somebody didn't wear a condom, or you were sexually assaulted, for example, you can get PEP, from like A&E or your local sexual health clinic as well. And it's a longer course of medication that has to be taken every day. But again, super effective and stops HIV transmission. Brilliant. We love it.
Pretty brilliant. Okay, so the last element of the really important things to know about HIV is the main reason why we need people to test for HIV is that people who know they have HIV, who are on effective treatment, live long, healthy lives, and they can't pass the virus on to anybody else. This is really quite like miraculous developments in medication, realistically, when you think about it.
Yeah.
To go from the 80s and 90s of somebody would contract HIV, the HIV virus would develop into AIDS virus, and that's what would kill people by affecting their immune system. What we have now is antiretroviral medication, which means that when someone contracts HIV and they're on that effective medication, it doesn't, the virus doesn't develop into AIDS. So that's why we quite often are saying to young people, no one's got AIDS. Like, we're not talking about AIDS.
Shut up.
Yeah, that's it. We're not talking about AIDS. We're talking about HIV.
Yeah.
But there are, so those people who are on that effective treatment become what is called U equals U. So undetectable equals untransmissible. This means that when someone has an undetectable amount of the virus in their body, so their viral load is so low, it's deemed as being undetectable, they can't transmit HIV onto someone else.
Yep.
And this is such an important thing to teach because people don't know this.
No.
People don't know why we are so adamant that everyone should be testing. People don't know that people living with HIV have these like long and healthy lives that they can't pass the virus on. And all of those things contribute to stigma.
Yeah.
And actually the UK's goal is to end new HIV transmission by 2030. And that is done by the goal is to do that by something like called 90-90-90.
Yeah.
So 90% of people who need it regularly testing, 90% of people who are in a target group accessing PrEP or PEP as needed, and 90% of people who are living with HIV on effective treatment.
Yeah.
And the science behind that is if that was achieved, then there wouldn't be any new cases in the UK. So
yeah,
it is a medical marvel and the change is enormous. And it's a really fine balance with young people because we don't actually want to scare them with the horrors and the things that we maybe grew up with of like, I don't know, people from this country have AIDS, people who are gay have AIDS, people are going to die of it, that kind of thing. We don't want to go back to that kind of stigma, but we also want people to know that actually there are risks involved and there is a medical marvels to help alleviate those risks. And it's so important. So if you've got a young person, if you don't know what their sexuality is, if you don't know who they're having sex with, just make sure they know about PEP and PrEP, like make sure they know these things exist.
Yeah.
If you have a young person who is like, hey, I'm gay, you need to have that conversation. It is your responsibility.
Definitely. And I was going to say, because I just don't, and this is nothing on the schools and the teachers, but I just don't know how much time they have during the RSE curriculum, especially when you get to year 10, 11, when as we've had to split this episode into two, there is so much to cover and so much to talk about. I often think that HIV is grouped in with the other STIs, but actually there's so much more to say. And like you said, really important information.
Absolutely. And I think that sometimes HIV in school gets covered like from a scientific perspective. And realistically, even like when we're teaching, we try and give as much information as you can. But if you've got a class of 30 or sometimes an assembly of 120, they don't get to ask their questions.
No.
They don't get to have any kind of more in-depth conversation about it.
And one thing I've just realised, I mean, this is something that young people are like, from when we were at school as well, it's like how STIs are transmitted.
Yeah, good point. We haven't talked about. We're nearly running out of time. It's okay. It's okay.
Last bit on STIs before we go on to our question. How are STIs actually transmitted, Kelsie? Can you get it from a toilet seat?
No.
Can you get it from kissing?
No.
Can you get it from sharing knives and forks?
No.
Okay.
Fabulous. Can you get it from towels?
No, you can't. I was thinking about those little pubic lice potentially,
but
it's the sex fluids.
Yeah, sex fluids.
Yeah, which is why we have the barrier methods to stop sex fluids being transferred to another person.
And when we're talking about HIV, transmission is through blood, through sex fluids, and HIV transmission can also be vertical transmission, so mother to child or through breast milk from mother to child.
Yeah.
So no toilet seats, no nothing. I have got a really good question for you this week.
Okay.
I've got a question that was actually asked by a 17-year-old young person that we came into contact with. And I thought, what a great question. What a good thing to discuss. Now, this young guy, he's got a girlfriend and he asked, how can we have sex without a condom safely? And I thought, what a great question because, they don't want to use condoms. Yeah. How are we going to have that conversation about how we do it safely?
Okay, so it's queen of organisation over here. It's all about how you then organise what happens. So Firstly, if they don't want to get pregnant, then his partner needs to go and have a chat with one of our lovely doctors maybe and talk about a method of contraception. And depending on which one they choose, say, for example, it's the implant, they then need to still use condoms for at least 7 days.
Yeah.
I say at least 7 days.
7 days.
7 days. Until that contraception has settled in their body to protect from pregnancy. Now, then before they go condomless, they probably also need to both get STI tested.
Yeah.
So they could maybe, because they're 17, order one of our lovely kits and get it sent to their house and do that at home. Or again, come into the clinic. They're both under 18. They can absolutely come into our clinic and see one of our consultants, have full STI screenings, wait for those results. Say, for example, one of those results came up that it was chlamydia. We're delaying that condomless sex a little bit more, but all for a good cause because they need to get treated for chlamydia and again, abstain from having sex for that treatment time. So like antibiotics is normally 7 days.
Yeah.
And then once all of those like boxes are ticked off, they can start having condomless sex if they wish and want to. And then if there's a change of partner, do it all over again.
Perfect. That is a fantastic explanation. Thank you, Sophie. And I think it is one that young people do want to know.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening to us so far talk through Key Stage 1 to 4 of the RSE curriculum. It has been amazing to tell you about all of these elements, and we've got a few more episodes of this podcast to make. So what we're going to do is we are going to come back to some kind of a little bit more tricky topics, and we will have some more conversations that are about what maybe isn't necessarily on the curriculum and what to do when you are concerned about a young person in your life. Amazing. Thank you.
Bye.